Ishvaram, to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Indra said, O great demon, I see by your discrimination and endurance in devotional service, despite your dangerous position, that you are a perfect devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supersoul, and friend of everyone. Purport. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Yam labdavacha param labam manyate nadikam tata yasmin stito nantukena gururnapi vichalyate. Established in Krishna consciousness, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there's no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of the greatest difficulty. An unalloyed devotee is never disturbed by any kind of trying circumstance. Indra was surprised to see that Vritasura, undisturbed, was fixed in devotional service to the Lord. For such a mentality is impossible for a demon. However, by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, anyone can become an exalted devotee. Shriyo Vaishyas Tata Shrudras Tepi Yanti Param Gatim. An unalloyed devotee is sure to return home back to Godhead. Om Ginataramandasya Ginanjana Shalakaya Chakshurunamitamena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadhara Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we are continuing with reading about the death of Vritasura. So of course, Chitraketu in his previous life and is a great devotee of the Lord. And Indra is very surprised by this as we are reading. We are starting today and we'll be continuing for the next several verses. The response of Indra to the words spoken by Vritasura, who for the last few verses has been giving transcendental knowledge about various subjects, the position of the living entities and the jiva, how one must do one's duty, and other subjects, as we have been hearing in Srimad Bhagavatam class. And Indra can see that despite Vritasura's dangerous position, he is still fixed in devotional service. Even though externally he is a demon. We hear in Bhagavad Gita that there are two mentalities that the conditioned living entity, or the living entity, I should say, can have. Either sura or asura, godly or demoniac. And that the devotee should develop such a godly mentality. Because, as Prabhupada explains in this purport, that being as fixed as Vritasura was in devotional service is not possible for one with a demoniac mentality. And we should see actually how fixed we are in unadulterated bhakti, unadulterated devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Ritasura, his condition is that he has just had his arms cut off. He has been defeated by uh, Indra. Basically, all that is left to do is to kill him. It's impossible for him even to fight back. He is simply waiting for death. But still, he is fixed in his devotional service, unshaken. So we should see in our own activities and our own mentality, is something shaking us in our devotional service? Many times, the mentality can enter that something a lot less dangerous or a lot less serious than having our arms cut off by the king of the demigods can give us pause in devotional service, which is the idea of social acceptability. We read in Bhagavatam, in actually the first few verses. Prabhupada even quotes it in the introduction before you even get to Bhagavatam proper, that this Srimad Bhagavatam is actually made to start a revolution in the impious lives of our current materialistic civilization. But sometimes the mentality can come in that we don't need to upset people or preach these things that are against the established social order. That, what is the use of speaking these uncomfortable truths if they will simply disturb the general populace? But we should consider the fact that the general populace needs disturbing. We, once again, here in Bhagavad Gita, or we hear throughout Bhagavatam and Prabhupada's lectures, purports, letters, everything, is that there are three types of people. That there are the devotees, the godly people, the suras, and there are the asuras, those who have a demoniac mentality, and there are the innocent, those who aren't necessarily in either camp, but they just follow whoever is in charge. We should then consider who actually is in charge. And I think everybody will agree the devotees are not in charge of the world, or even any large portion of it. Meaning that if we wish to follow the general populace, we are following demons. And if you think exactly like a demon and you act exactly like a demon, I'm pretty sure everybody here knows inductive logic uh, and can complete that syllogism. So we should actually think and consider when looking at society in general, what actually is our uh, perspective? What is the Bhagavatam version? Because we take our version as devotees of Krishna from the Bhagavatam and the Acharyas, not from simple social uh, convenience. Sometimes it is uh, lauded, put through kind of the news networks that such and such politician has come to honor the devotees by doing some puja or coming for some opening of some temple. And I'm not against that. Uh, Prabhupada wasn't even against that. But it should be that they're coming because we have made the politicians into devotees, not that we are uh, adapting ourselves to this demoniac society. Sometimes I've seen some preaching centers where uh, the mood seems to be to avoid uncomfortable topics for the convenience, uh, or I should say, on the plea of saying we don't wish to alienate people. Just come, give them prasad, some kirtan, but don't really dive deep into the conclusions of the acharyas because they're too alienating to the uh, people in general. And if somebody is very, very new, very much in the neophyte stage, that program is okay. We don't wish to alienate people right off the bat. If it's their first time coming, if they're coming to a yoga program or just having prasadam, that's okay. But it is not that just because that's okay for neophytes, that we should always stay neophyte. I was speaking to somebody from a preaching center that visited the farm, and uh, I asked them how long they have been coming to the preaching center. They said 4 years. And once I got to talking to them, I came to realize that nobody had ever given this person japa beads or taught them how to chant Hare Krishna. He had just skimmed Bhagavad Gita. He had never met anybody who was thoughtful and rejected scientific materialism. And he did not even know what the four relative principles are after 4 years of associating with devotees. And of course, a one-off might just be a fluke. Maybe he wasn't so seriously coming. But with this particular place, I had heard from other people similar things. Uh, when I was describing this to one of the devotees that I was speaking to over Prasadam one day, he uh, his response was, what are they talking about? What are they talking about to him? If you aren't delivering the message of the acharyas in a way that is unshaken by either social praise or social approbation. And my observation, just personally, is that at some of these centers who take this mentality, uh, of the idea that we shouldn't disturb people too much. We should just have kirtan, have prasadam, teach people to sing Hare Krishna very well, uh, and we will discuss the pastimes in Vrindavan, and have very nice talks of Krishna's pastimes with the cowherd boys or with the gopis that are very enchanting. Of course, sometimes they even speak about uh, pastimes of Krishna and Radha or with the cowherd boys that aren't found in the books that Prabhupada has translated or written. I'm not sure where they are finding these and if it's a bona fide source. But uh, the focus is not on actually destroying or cutting the anarthas out of the heart, but just on hearing nice talks and having nice kirtan. But the question, one could even raise the question, how much of the singing is actually kirtan? If one does not have conviction, or at the very least faith, in the words of the acharyas. At the very best, it might be the shadow of it, but it is not necessarily even very purifying. And then actually, if one uh, does not disabuse people of especially their Mayavad notions, which is everywhere in the West, Prabhupada defined his own mission. It's not like his disciples gave him his pranam mantras. The disciples at the beginning didn't even know Sanskrit. He defined his own mission as being the servant of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who has come to the West to save them from impersonalism and voidism. And actually, if we do not mm, overcome this, if preach strongly against this, but just say, oh, come, let everybody chant, we could be hearing kirtan, or so-called kirtan, from impersonalists, from Mayavadis, it would be better if they sang pop songs in the temple than to hear kirtan from a Mayavadi. It is described as like milk touched by the lips of a serpent. Uh, what I think of it as, or an analogy that I've thought of, so I don't know if anybody was ever into horror movies, where sometimes, the victim is hiding, and the killer is coming around with a knife saying, so and so, where are you? This kind of chanting of the name is not very pleasing, because the Mayavadis are Krishnaha, the attempted killers of Vishnu. So we should preach very strongly against these things and not think that uh, just because the general populace will be very disturbed by these things, that we should stop preaching. The uh, strong words of the acharyas, that just because the social conventions or social views or scientific views or philosophical views uh, are there, that we should adulterate the message of the acharyas. Instead, we should uh, be very strong and have Prabhupada as Prabhupada, the acharyas, the sadhus, and Shastra as are the foundation of our epistemology. Not that we just accept that everybody, whatever is there in society, is what we believe. There is a particular idea. I think I've mentioned it before when I was giving a comment to a class. I think the last time Dina Polika gave class last week, I mentioned this idea that I've heard from creeping in certain places, uh, even among very senior people who have done far more for Prabhupada than I have, and probably will ever do. But I feel that it needs to be addressed, which is this idea that we should follow Prabhupada for his spiritual instructions, but his material instructions are just because of the time and place that he was born, that they are from Indian culture, and that we do not have to follow them. Once again, he might ask, why I feel qualified to speak on these things. being as junior and neophyte as I am. And you might, somebody who criticizes me in that way will probably have a point, but it might be considered a battlefield medic situation. You know, if somebody is injured on the battlefield in an emergency situation, even somebody without medical qualification may come to try to aid. So I am speaking about this, even though I am uh, very junior to even many of the people here and among all of the devotees. But I feel the need to actually speak directly against this idea of dividing Prabhupada into the spiritual side and the material side, and saying that we only have to listen to one. I have even heard a very senior devotee who is uh, considered a uh, authority on Shastra when confronted with this idea during a class, during a training series meant for the future leaders of ISKCON, not say anything in response to it, which Prabhupada, of course, gave the standard that silence could be seen as tacit approval. So I'm going to spend some time trying to refute this idea of the half-can Prabhupada. And one can see, one who has studied Srimad Bhagavatam and Prabhupada's books, can see that this idea of um, Prabhupada only believes certain conclusions of the Shastras because he was born in India, is actually leads one to reject Prabhupada and will eventually reject Krishna. Because this idea is that uh, the idea is non-different than saying that Prabhupada is a conditioned soul, that he only believes these things uh, because he was born in a particular cultural milieu uh, and that he was influenced by this, and that we don't have to listen to those things. And if Prabhupada is a conditioned soul, what chance do the rest of us have? Most of us are second generation devotees, as they say, meaning that we are not directly disciples of Prabhupada. I believe actually only one of us on the call is directly a Prabhupada disciple. The rest of us have a guru who is a disciple of Prabhupada. But if Prabhupada is a conditioned soul, then by what authority do our gurus have to initiate us even? This is the um, idea of parampara. This is uh, in some ways mirroring the other major heresy that ISKCON has uh, battled with, which is Ritvik, which tries to destroy the idea of parampara and disciplic succession. Because all of the authority of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness comes from the fact that Prabhupada is a Nityasiddha liberated soul, not that he is conditioned by Indian culture. And even more fundamentally, how do we know what is spiritual and what is material? You know, one can say that uh, you know, one tack that one could take is, oh, well, the pastimes of uh, Radha and Krishna, Sita Ram, all these stories are uh, spiritual, and everything having to do with our day-to-day lives is material. Uh, but I don't think this idea flies, uh, because even it can be hard to tease out what exactly is there. What is considered a spiritual instruction, or what is a material instruction. For example, the instruction that, ideally, at least, uh, a woman during her monthly period of contamination should not touch the deities. Is that a spiritual instruction? Or is that just because, as some devotees, some people have noted, Prabhupada has a thing about women? Uh, or Krishna's instruction to not eat too much or eat too little, to not sleep too much or not sleep too little. Is that a spiritual instruction? Or, is it uh, just, diet culture, fat phobia, or something like that? What we are left with is, if we try to make this division, we are simply deciding ourselves that we know better than Prabhupada what is material and what is spiritual. And this is simply just jumping over the guru, directly trying to go to Krishna. And speaking of Krishna, if we are dividing the world, the instructions of Prabhupada, into things that he just believes because he is Indian and things that we should accept, it's not clear to me why Krishna should be on the things that we should accept instead of the things that Prabhupada just believes because he is Indian, in the sense that religion is part of culture. This is actually an argument that the atheists make. That, if you were born in a Western country, you're a Christian. If you're born in a Muslim country, you're a Muslim. So it is all just cultural conditioning. And if we accept that the conclusions that Prabhupada drew from Shastra are culturally conditioned, it's not clear that we would even save Krishna. Or we would just consider Krishna one manifestation among many of gods, or, there are many paths to the same way by the various cultures, and all of these things that are just straight Mayavad philosophy that Prabhupada wanted to uh, push out. And ultimately, the question becomes, how then do we determine the proper standard? Because the fact is that we must have some guru. And if it's not Prabhupada, it's going to be somebody else. And practically speaking, it'll be somebody from this general society, this demoniac society. Whatever, political or cultural uh, hmm, authority we will replace Prabhupada with. Some people might say, oh, we shouldn't. Uh, how should I? How far do I want to go with this? Okay, I'll go for it. Some, or one major uh, philosophy that people take as trying to temper Prabhupada's is influenced by uh, what is kind of in the internet culture called wokeism. Of course, we reject both wokeism and non-Krishna conscious conservatism and non-Krishna conscious liberalism and anything non-Krishna conscious. But I will talk just to illustrate this point of putting somebody else as a guru. Uh, to I will attack this one philosophy, even though I could attack so many others, and particularly the strain of postmodernism within the current sociocultural milieu. We should actually have to look at the people that these ideas are flowing from. I've mentioned in class before, I've mentioned the name at least, of one of the great postmodern, so-called great postmodern philosophers, Michel Foucault. I've read some of his work. It is, of course, all nonsense. But if one looks at his activities, I feel that I'd have to go take baths just by saying his name. They were so demoniac. I usually don't talk about them because, especially in mixed company, uh, because they're just so contaminating. Like they're just so uh, mm, insane that uh, if one just reads about them, one should understand one should not replace Prabhupada with people such as these. That's just one example. I won't go into his uh, scoundrel activities, but if one reads about them, one can see that how can such a person even be sane, much less an authority? Uh, but if we are accepting the general populace that believes in the philosophies of Foucault or Derrida or Karl Marx or Ayn Rand or Sigmund Freud or Albert Einstein or anything but the unadulterated pure Krishna consciousness as taught by the acharyas and Prabhupada and the Shastra, then we are replacing the spiritual master with these conditioned souls. So we should be very careful actually about the approach that we take to Krishna consciousness. And we should try to preach to each other, preach to the non devotees, and ultimately preach to ourselves about how to actually understand the society into which we were born in and which we are trying to escape from. Because otherwise, we have every chance of falling back down into that society and being caught up again in the endless cycle of birth and death. And so, yes, we should talk about these things. They might not be, as relishable as, or even bring us to the platform of pure bhakti as, the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, or the gopis, or the cowherd boys, or Vrindavan Leela, or Dwarka Leela, or the Ramayan, or anything even that Prabhupada, the pastimes that Prabhupada talks about in Krishna book or Bhagavatam or in other places. But this is actually protective of our devotional service, actually understanding what we are defined as and what we are defined against, which is everything material, all sorts of cheating. Uh, so there's more that I could say, but I'm also giving class tomorrow, so I will continue talking about these things and also offering from my humble position some possible solutions to how we can increase this understanding and this type of preaching against demoniac society as well. So we have a little bit of time. I am sure after such a class, there are some comments So if anybody would like to jump in. Agari Krishna,
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Oh my God. You've obviously received the mercy of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Such a
thank you,
powerful
Prabhu.
class. Yeah, so as you were speaking about, you know, mm, the contamination that our philosophy faces in Kali Yuga, I was just thinking is that a lot of the demoniac elites is something I've been, reading about. Um, Demoniac elites are in pedophilia. And so it's like in the first canto, we, yeah, Prabhupada, he writes about how illicit sex destroys cleanliness in society. And basically, the ability to obviously discriminate between what is spirit and what is matter stems from cleanliness of the subtle body, being able to see things clearly. So, in assessing, it seems like a lot of devotees aren't actually aware of just how demoniac these philosophers are, the authorities in universities, politicians, because they basically present this idea that they're able to give shelter through different policies, making things nice and palatable. But the activities are actually unknown. So could you maybe, I mean, I know you don't want to get into the details of just how demoniac these guys are, but I think it's like um, it's worth noting, So Prabhupada would just, give like cursory information about like, yeah, without getting into the details, but just the idea. So to what my question really relates to in terms of protecting one's bhakti is a separate effort required to actually understand the activities of these authorities so that we don't develop the blind spot that you're talking about trying to make things palatable for the sake of preaching, when in fact we can also get sucked into the black hole of basically considering Prabhupada as a conditioned soul.
Yeah, so as far as should we get into all of this ideas? Actually how demoniac these people are. I would say it depends on how attached you are to the philosophy in general. So, like for myself, I was very attached to scientific philosophy. So I studied and thought about very deeply how actually all the scientists are cheaters and rascals and just fools, really. And I can now say very confidently, yeah, like all the material scientists are, just scoundrels and they're cheaters and they're trying to bewilder everybody. So if one is enamored by these, it might be, if one just automatically rejects them, then you don't need to worry about them. They're just some other, nonsense person. But if one, is uh, enamored or into the philosophy of Foucault, for example, uh, then yeah, one might have uh, one might get into these things to just see how insane these people are. And you kind of uh, said, to give some cursory information to actually just see, or you requested that I give some cursory information to see how crazy these people are. So I'll try to do so without going into too much detail. But in one of Foucault's books, he talks about is in his book, I believe, The History of Sexuality. So 4 books all about sex life, uh, where he talks about the assault of a 6-year-old girl by a French villager. And he is saying that the prosecution of this French villager is an example of the oppressive nature of society. And all throughout is basically making jokes at the expense of this child victim. One can also, if one wants to really see his demoniac nature, research into uh, his activities with young boys when he was in Tunisia. And remember also that he knew that he was HIV positive at the time. So that is all. I won't go too far into that. Uh, I was just saying that because it was requested to actually see how demoniac these philosophers are. Tarka Prabhu, I was thinking you would have some comments.
Why would you think a thing like that? I actually you have my head reeling. I don't know where to begin. Um, got so much to say. I want to thank you for a wonderful class. I'm delighted that you are addressing these issues. I can tell you that the points that you have raised are issues of grave concern of a great many of my god siblings and myself as well. Um, we are sometimes appalled to see some of the peculiar directions that some in our society have have taken, um, directions which serve to undermine um, the mission by um, undermining one's faith in our founder Acharya and our gurus in general. Um, from the Shvetasvatara Upanishad, we have Yasya Deve Parabhaktir Yata Deve Tata Gurau Tasyaite Katita Hyarta Prakashante Mahatmaraha, that unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master, all the imports of Vedic knowledge are automatically revealed. And that is the process of acquiring knowledge. It is a process of um, realization through revelation, and it depends entirely upon having faith in the spiritual master. In the absence of that, you are absolutely lost. You can't really progress beyond a certain very rudimentary level. Um, so part of the art and science of the cultivation of Krishna consciousness is understanding and engaging in the process of cultivating faith in the spiritual master. Sometimes we see that the mistake is made of trying to do otherwise. Um, Somehow or other, trying to arrive at the truth by marginalizing and minimizing um, uh, the spiritual master and the role of the spiritual master, minimizing the knowledge of the spiritual master. Um, some of it stems from an effort to try to rationalize the fact that Srila Prabhupada sometimes made statements that we believe to be empirically untrue. Um, those statements are very few. Actually, when you look at the body of Srila Prabhupada's works, they're finite, and there are just a few instances in which Srila Prabhupada said some things which may be questionable. Um, some of those things which are said to be questionable, one could actually make a sound and compelling argument that they are, in
Yes.
fact, not questionable. Um, and in many cases, you will find if you read extensively that there are statements in Shastra that support what Srila Prabhupada has said, that it was not something that he just manufactured. Um, so what am I trying to say? I really appreciate what you're saying, and I think it is hugely important and absolutely should be discussed extensively. Your relative seniority is not a factor in a case like this, as you say. Um, um,
Not a
what was
full
it?
merit.
Yes, right. So, yeah, it's just critical. There have been many arguments put forth by bright and well-intentioned individuals, many of whom have considerable seniority, um, but which are statements that serve to undermine one's faith in the spiritual master. I'm delighted that you pointed out the fact that to accept some of these ideas means that you are accepting the idea that the spiritual master is or in this case, our founder, Acharya, is a conditioned soul. And many individuals don't realize that that's what they're saying, but tacitly they are saying exactly that. That Srila Prabhupada is a product of his environment, his upbringing. He's a conditioned soul.
Yeah, and
We,
in my opinion, this heresy is more dangerous than Ridvikism.
yes, yes, it's absolutely insidious, and it needs to be uprooted and severely thrashed into oblivion. It's extremely serious. So I'm really, really grateful. Um,
Thank you,
there's
Prabhu.
another hand up, so I don't want
Yeah.
to take all the time, but thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Haribol. Dinapalika.
All right, well, thank you
Haribol.
for your class. Like Tarka Prabhu was saying, I really appreciate, yeah, even though you're saying you're less senior, that you're bringing up these points. And I always appreciate the devotees like you and Tarka Prabhu that keep us in line and check. So it's very nice. I just had one question. I don't know if well, yeah, it's more clarification. It's not like really devil's advocate, but I was thinking how sometimes like there's preaching centers that are doing both simultaneously, like casting a wide net, and then also, like you were giving that example of that devotee that had been coming for 4 years. They're like, they don't know practically anything about Krishna consciousness. And I was thinking, like, at some of maybe even at Mantra Lounge too, to an extent, but at some of the loft style preaching centers that Gurudev has, that I know some people, they're not too many, but yeah, have been coming for a while, and they just like the yoga, they like the teacher, they like Gurudev's, they don't know that they're Gurudev's disciples, they like the prasad, and they're just like, maybe sometimes they'll come to a Sunday feast and do kirtan, but really that's not like the main reason why they're there. But at the same time, these preaching centers, like I think I heard him explain at the Mayapur when he was presenting, like cracking a Western city or whatever it was titled,
Yeah.
that because he can't really go out on book distribution, he sees it as like he's basically creating a space, much like book distribution, that is sort of casting a wide net, and then you can pull people from there. And obviously, we've seen, the ashrams that result from that have created some amazing devotees that are reading Prabhupada's books 2 hours every day, and
Yeah.
going out on book distribution, making so many more devotees. So Yeah, I was just wondering how to reconcile that, or maybe it's probably a big topic, so maybe if you could just touch on it tomorrow.
Yeah, so I will speak about it some now, even if I have to bring the computer outside for the deity greeting. I think this is important enough to keep going with. Uh, so basically, this is the idea of what has become known as bridge preaching. Uh, and one time, several times, our Guru Maharaj was actually asked directly about this, about bridge preaching. And he said that it's okay, but the bridge should be to somewhere and it should be short, in the sense that you don't have somebody wallowing in a yoga program for 4 years before you give them the real thing. If they might accept or they might not accept the real thing, that's up to them. They might accept and they have very good fortune, or they might not accept and say, I still want to be a demon. Uh, but you should at least present to them, not that, oh, we're very, we're a yoga society or a vegetarian society or things like that. We're the Krishna society. We are the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And we might have these programs to attract people, but what are we attracting them to? In the sense that, yeah, we can use these things to get them in the door. But once they're in the door, we should tell them what we're about. And uh, some might reject and some might choose to stay. If you're selling diamonds, it's not that everybody is there. Only few people can uh, afford diamonds. Everybody else has to be satisfied with cut glass. So hopefully that uh, clarifies things some. If there are not any other uh, things.
Yeah, so basically, the crux of it is that there should actually be an attempt to
Yes.
present it to them, like that's, and then if they take or not, it's like we've done our duty to try to present it to them. And it's like if they're like, no, 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 I just want to keep doing yoga, then at least you tried as a devotee, or maybe
Yeah,
can think
exactly.
of a different way to try with them.
Yeah, like I mean, even at Mantra Lounge, even when we did yoga programs, I know at least Gita Govinda always ended with teaching people to chant japa, or sometimes kirtan, and encouraging people to, come to the Friday night class, which was Bhagavad Gita. So it's not that, oh, we'll just teach you yoga and take your money. You should try to give them the real thing. So yeah, I think you've,
I
uh,
think
yeah.
that clarifies it.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions?
There's lots
Hi,
of comments for
Krishna.
Buddhists. No time.
I'm willing, the doors aren't opening yet. I just heard the offering bell, so I think we have a little bit of time.
Hare Krishna. I just wanted to say thank you, thank you, thank you, Kalisra. What a
Thank you.
wonderful class. And it's just amazing. Like you're on fire for Krishna and Krishna consciousness. And it was just beautiful to hear. And I'm very grateful because sometimes, as a really neophyte devotee, it is beautiful to hear the past times and it is wonderful. But I was actually in India at a festival, and there were people from another center that sort of, I don't know, would you call it a sort of an open policy, whatever, what you were talking about. And there
Yeah.
was a person who was visiting and they put their feet up on Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa, like they put their feet up. And I called over one of the guides. Yeah, that's how I look too. Like, what is happening? And I called over one and I said, do you think you should tell her that that's not appropriate? And they said to me, oh, no, we don't want to offend them. And then one of the senior devotees that I was traveling with got up and went over and it's polite, right? Take your feet
Yeah.
down. take your feet down. This is not appropriate. And sat and explained to her a little bit why. And it's like you can't expect people to know if they're not taught. You can't expect people to know. And this is such a sweet, sweet philosophy. Bhakti is so sweet. Why would you not want to offer it? And I don't know. It's very interesting. And I've seen it a lot, particularly at a preaching center that's close to me up in the city. When I say the city, I mean New York City, New York.
Yeah.
But though there's a lot of it, and it's easy to get confused. And about you being a neophyte, and I'm so much more neophyte than you. There's an English saying, "Out of the mouths of babes," right? Right. So thank you so much, Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you. Hare Krishna. Yeah, this whole idea of that we don't want to offend people. Well, of course, we don't go out of our way to offend people. Uh, but sometimes sometimes you have to shout to wake up a sleeping man, is the analogy that is sometimes used. Uh, in that, sometimes we have to use very strong language as if but we have to be able to back it up as well. So, I can say, speaking as a former foolish rascal material scientist myself, that the material scientists are all fools and rascals and cheaters. Because I know I was a fool, a rascal, and a cheater. And so yeah, we should not, of course, go out of our way to offend people, but also in a certain sense, if people from a demoniac society are being offended by us, we're doing our job. Tina Polika again.
I just had one point on that, is that when people feel that you really care for them, there's actually no problem in correcting them.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, we've had ashram training. Leela Kishori's a mother. She probably knows too. It's like if people really feel like they have their best interest in mind, then if you tell them to, very nicely take your feet off of the Vyasasana and explain to them why, that's why, Krishna consciousness is such a personal philosophy, because it takes work by the devotees to, if you want to correct somebody, you also have to put in the work to like create a caring personal relationship with them.
Mhm.
So anyway, just thought to add that.
Thank you. Tarka?
With regards to the question of discussing certain mundane subject matters, what may be appropriate and what is not appropriate, there is actually a necessity for the discussion of some types of things,
Mhm.
and which are of a mundane subject matter, but it's just pertinent to our discussion of what is transcendental. So. This is hinted at in the Sri Upanishad, Mantra 11
Mhm.
says, um, only one who can learn the process of nescience
Yep.
and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. So um, both, both knowledge and nescience, both important. One of the items of knowledge that Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita is to recognize the evil of birth and death. Um, so those things have to be discussed also, so that you will understand what it means. So not a problem, but there are some things that unnecessary discussion, of course, we avoid. Sometimes
Yes.
going into the detail about some aspects of nations, there's just no necessity.
Mhm.
It is harmful rather than beneficial. So you have to exercise a little discretion, but not that you avoid it altogether. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's necessary. Um,
I think they're probably about close to opening the doors.
yeah.
So I'm also giving class tomorrow, and we'll be continuing on these topics. So maybe we should table more discussion until tomorrow. Thank you, devotees, for your appreciation. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay.